What's up, fellas? With the Reagan administration being over 40 years old now, I wanted to look back on his administration and examine the good and the bad and why he was so popular during his time in office. I also want to look at why conservatives idolize him and his policies while more liberal people are more critical of him. In the 1980 election, Reagan was facing incumbent President Jimmy Carter, who was unpopular due to the Iran hostage crisis, where 52 American diplomats and citizens were held hostage by a group of militarized Iranian college students. Reagan was expected to win, but nobody predicted just how big his win was. Reagan received 489 electoral votes, while Carter only received 49 electoral votes. The only state that was in strong opposition to Reagan in the polls was Carter's home state of Georgia. In the 1984 election, Reagan was up against former Vice President Walter Mondale, and the tide was swinging Reagan's way the entire course of the election cycle, even after Mondale named a woman, Geraldine Ferraro, as his vice presidential nominee. Now, normally when an incumbent wins, they usually win by less than what they did the first time. But if we look at this electoral map, Reagan won every single state except Mondale's home state of Minnesota. That's an astounding 525 electoral votes to a mere 13 electoral votes, which is just Minnesota and Washington, D.C. In fact, when he was asked what he wanted for Christmas, Reagan joked that Minnesota would have been nice. In fact, millions of registered Democrats voted for Reagan in that election. That's just how popular he was with the American people. But what was it about Reagan that made him so popular? He made being a conservative cool again. He had a charm about him that helped captivate the American public. Just look at this famous clip from a 1984 debate when age was brought up.
You already are the oldest president in history, and some of your staff say you were tired after your most recent encounter with Mr. Mondale. I recall yet that President Kennedy had to go for days on end with very little sleep during the Cuba Missile Crisis. Is there any doubt in your mind that you would be able to function in such circumstances?
Not at all, Mr. Truitt, and I want you to know that also I will not make age an issue of this campaign. I am not going to exploit for political purposes my opponent's youth and inexperience. If I still have time, I might add, Mr. Truitt, that it was Seneca or it was Cicero, I don't know which, that said, if it was not for the elders correcting the mistakes of the young, there would be no state.
Reagan was able to captivate his audiences and create a persona of can't do wrong to help launch him into political success. Reagan was credited for fixing the economy through Reaganomics, which was basically trickle-down economics, but fancier. He cut taxes, granted 3 million immigrants amnesty into the United States, and he helped finalize the civil rights that had been fought for so long, and survived an assassination attempt. In 1982, Reagan signed a bill that extended the Voting Rights Act, which helped make it easier for people of color to vote. Reagan was also known for escalating the Cold War with the Russians. He refused to surrender to communist Russia and fought tooth and nail to end the conflict with an American victory, which happened after he left office. However, there were the downsides to the Reagan administration, one of the major ones being the war on drugs. In 1986, Reagan signed a drug enforcement bill that budgeted $1.7 billion, which is equivalent to $4 billion in today's money, to fund the war on drugs and specified a mandatory minimum penalty for drug offenses. We also sent U.S. forces to Colombia to battle with drug lords over the shipping and exporting of cocaine to the United States. The Reagan administration was also notorious for ignoring the AIDS crisis going on in America. The epidemic began around the same year he took office, 1981, and funding for AIDS treatment went down significantly during the administration's time in office. By the time President Reagan gave his first public speech on the matter, 1987, more than 36,000 Americans had been diagnosed with the disease and more than 20,000 had died from it. He also liked to bomb Libya, but we don't talk about that one anymore. And then there was the Iran-Contra affair, where basically the United States government sold guns and gave funds to the Iranians to fund the Contra rebels fighting against Nicaragua and its government. Oh, and the CIA also sold cocaine to them as well, but that's besides the point. Reagan denied knowing anything about the affair and started his own internal investigation into the matter. His popularity dropped from 67% to 46% in a single week, the largest drop in presidential popularity in a single week in American history. There were 11 convictions and 14 indictments of Reagan's staff after the investigation concluded. When Reagan left office, however, he had immense popularity, and his vice president, George H.W. Bush, rode that popularity to a presidency of his own lasting from 1989 to 1993. However, in recent years, Reagan has grown to become a more controversial figure in American politics. People have begun to point out that Reagan's system of Reaganomics, that thing that boosted the economy so much, wasn't really beneficial for every American, as during the Reagan presidency there was the largest wealth gap between the upper class and the lower class in American history. His popularity with the right grows every day, and his popularity with the left diminishes by the hour. And although Reagan wasn't perfect by any means, he's much better than the options we face today. Thank you all for taking the time out of your day to watch this. I appreciate it so much. I'll have links to my Twitter and my Discord server in the description below. And as always, I'll see you on the flip side.
Because people have got to know whether or not their president is a crook. Well, I'm not a crook.
Motherfucking boss.